had no intention of doing anything wrong. I truly didn't. My husband was away on a business trip to Chicago, and all I wanted was a night out, a chance to dress up, have a few drinks with friends, and, for just a moment, feel like I still had a little freedom. Emily picked the bar, lively enough to chase away the loneliness, but not too noisy to make things feel chaotic. I wore the dress my husband once called dangerously cute. It had been ages since I'd worn it, and even longer since I'd felt like an attractive woman, not just a devoted wife or a dependable colleague. The first cocktail went down easily. I laughed with Emily, letting myself get lost in the conversation. But in the back of my mind, there was still a quiet space, observing the room. That's when I saw him. He was sitting alone at the bar, slowly, turning his glass in his hand, his gaze calm and unhurried. He wasn't too young, nor too polished, but there was a quiet confidence in him that drew my attention. I couldn't help but look again. He caught my gaze and didn't look away. Just one glance, but something inside me stirred, gently. I turned away, smiling awkwardly. Maybe I'd had that drink a little too fast. "What's going on?" Emily asked, following my gaze. "Nothing," I replied. "Probably just someone I know but can't quite place." I lied, and we both knew it. I wasn't planning to approach him, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the space between us, as if the very air was pulling me closer, inch by inch. Emily went to order another round, and I stayed at the table, alone. Maybe a part of me wanted to see if he'd come over, or if I was just another fleeting glance among the haze of city lights. That night, he walked toward me, slowly and confidently. Not aggressive, not possessive. He stopped beside the table, keeping just enough distance, and said, "Excuse me, am I interrupting?" I looked up. He stood there, calm, composed, with the grounded presence of someone who knew exactly who they were. His face was no longer young, but there was something steady and trustworthy about him. A man who had been through things. "Well," I replied, half teasing, half curious. "I suppose that depends on why you're here." He smiled, just enough, not flashy, not fake. "I just thought a woman with eyes that deep probably shouldn't be sitting alone for too long." I raised an eyebrow but didn't push him away. "Sounds like a line you've practiced a few times." He shook his head. "No, I don't usually approach women who wear wedding rings." I paused, then looked down at my hand. The ring was still there, right where it always was. I hadn't hidden it, but I hadn't expected him to notice either. "I'm just out with a friend tonight," I said slowly, lowering my voice slightly. "My husband's away on a business trip. Everything's still normal." I didn't know why I felt the need to explain, or why I didn't just say I didn't care. Maybe it was the honesty in his eyes. Something about it made me not want to start this conversation with a lie. He gave a small nod. "I'm not here to change that. I just think sometimes people need to talk to someone who has nothing to do with work, family, or responsibility." I looked at him a moment longer, then gestured to the seat across from me. "Then please have a seat." He sat down, and we started talking about nothing important, but somehow the minutes passed quicker than I'd expected. There were no clumsy flirtations, no eyes scanning me like merchandise, just two people on opposite ends of grown-up lives, quietly exploring what they might have lost in the rhythm of routine. What surprised me was the comfort, the strange kind of safety that came from talking to someone completely unfamiliar. No pressure, no expectations, but so much space for me to simply be myself. When Emily returned and saw him sitting there, she just looked at me, smirked softly, and said nothing. She knew. She understood. And I was starting to understand myself, too. Maybe for the first time in a long while, I wasn't trying to be someone's wife. I was just me. A woman who still had feelings, who still longed for connection. And tonight, I let myself feel that without guilt. We left the bar close to midnight. Emily had already called a cab. She didn't ask much, just touched my hand before she walked away. In that quiet gesture, I understood that she supported me without needing to say a word. He offered to take me home. No hidden meanings, no loaded suggestions, just a simple line. "My car is parked around the corner, if that's okay with you." And it was. We walked slowly through a few quiet streets in downtown San Diego, where the streetlights cast golden reflections over rain-slicked bricks. Neither of us said much, but the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like breathing space, just wide enough to hear my own heart a little more clearly. When the car pulled up in front of the hotel where I was staying for a few days, I didn't rush to open the door. I stayed, hands resting on my lap, eyes staring straight ahead. "I suppose I should thank you for getting me back safely," I said, trying to keep my voice even, though it softened on its own. "And for the conversation." He turned to me. Then, and I saw it, a flicker of reflection in his eyes, quiet and steady. "You don't have to thank me," he said, "but if I may, I'd like to say something." I stayed silent, nodded gently. "You don't have to explain or apologize for how you feel. Sometimes it's not temptation we fall into. Sometimes we're just searching for something that makes us feel real again, alive." I drew in a slow breath. I knew that. I knew it. But hearing someone else say it, especially now, felt like it struck the deepest part of me, a part I hadn't let anyone touch in a long time. I turned toward him slowly and asked, "What?" If I said, "I just want to stretch this moment a little longer, just a little," would you think that's wrong? He didn't answer right away. He looked at me without judgment, without rushing, and somehow it was that pause that made me trust him more. "I don't think anything born from consent, honesty, and clear boundaries can be wrong," he said. I opened the car door then, stood up, but didn't walk away. My hand still rested on the frame. Part of me turned back toward the inside. "I'm on the 8th floor," I said, voice steady, natural. "If you'd like to come up for another drink, no promises, no pretending, just truth left open-ended." He nodded. No questions. No need for confirmation. We stepped into the elevator, just the two of us, and I could hear my heartbeat as clear as day. Day not from fear, but from a body waking up responding to emotion, to memory, to the rare, unfamiliar feeling of being wanted. I thought back to the last time I touched a man not out of duty. Not because I should, but because I truly wanted to. It had been so long enough that I'd nearly forgotten who I was before I became someone's wife I didn't want to betray. I didn't want to destroy anything. But I was standing at the edge of something deeply real and experience. I needed not to change anyone else, but to understand myself more fully. The door too, the room clicked open. He stepped inside first. I followed there. Was no rush, no sudden touches, just a new space, filled with quiet consent. I poured the wine. He stood by the window looking out over the city. We didn't say much, but this silence, it didn't need to be filled. I knew then, whatever happened next wouldn't be out of loneliness, it would be about me. A woman learning how to listen to herself, to honor not just her emotions, but her boundaries. I handed him the glass of wine. Our hands brushed just briefly, but it was enough to make me shiver. Not from the cold, but from the sensation of touching someone because I chose to didn't rush. He sat beside me, leaving just enough space as if he was waiting for me to take the next step. And I did. I turned toward him, reaching gently for the collar of his shirt. My voice, barely, above a whisper. "I don't know exactly what I'm hoping for. I just know I don't want to stop here." He nodded softly. No questions, no expectations. We moved closer. The first kiss was quiet, no turgent, not dramatic, like feeling your way through a darkened room with your fingertips. Gentle, reverent, curious. His hand found my waist, warm, steady, patient. No pulling, no insistence. just presence as if to say, "I'm not going anywhere unless you want me to." I leaned in, resting against him, and for the first time in months, I felt free inside my own body. Not a mother, not a wife, just a woman, living a moment she'd chosen for herself. We didn't go. Further, there was no need to rush. Sometimes the right touch at the right time goes deeper than anything. Intense. And I knew tonight wasn't about the physical. It was about the right to feel, the right to choose. I couldn't say if it was the wine, the soft light in the room, or the way he was looking at me, warm but sharp. But something stirred inside me, not just emotion. A real physical. Needy leaned closer, pressed my lips gently against the side of his neck, a fleeting kiss, but left with intention a trace. He inhaled, his hand still resting on my thigh, not pulling, not resisting, just waiting. "I don't want to sleep alone tonight," I whispered, and somehow my voice sounded even more certain than I expected it to. He turned to me, eyes meeting mine, not rushed, not uncertain. "What do you want?" he asked. Not a challenge, an invitation, a space for me to define my own boundary, and I knew I wasn't dreaming. I was awake. In every sense of the word. I want to feel like I'm being touched, like I'm still worth desiring without a moment's hesitation. He leaned in his hand, sliding up the curve of my back, steady, knowing the kiss this time was deeper, warmer, but still held the same reverence as the first. No intrusion, only discovery. I climbed onto his lap, my legs folding around his waist, no longer a hesitant embrace, but a quiet declaration. "I want this for me." His hand traced the length of my thigh, resting at my hip, that fragile line between wanting and restraint drawn clearly in the silence. "Slow down," he asked with his eyes. I shook my head, just barely. "It's already slow enough." We didn't say another word. My fingers moved to his shirt, finding each button, undoing them. One by one, slow, but without hesitation. Each piece of fabric slipping away, each inch of skin revealed, and I looked at him like I was rediscovering something I hadn't realized I still had the right to claim. He whispered into my ear, "You'll lead, I'm just here to follow." It was something I had never heard from a man before, and yet it gave me a strange kind of confidence, like stepping into a role I didn't know had always been waiting for me. I leaned down, pressing soft kisses along his collarbone, not to seduce, but to affirm that this time I got to choose. How I gave and how I was allowed to receive tonight would be about consent, about understanding and answering one, another about touch without urgency, breath without hiding, and about me, a woman no longer afraid of her own needs. I woke up to morning light, slipping through the slats of the curtain, falling gently across my bare shoulder. The room was still, his breath slow beside me. Not possessive, not expectant, just present. I lay still, eyes tracing the keiling. My heart wasn't racing like it had the night before, but another rhythm pulsed through me, slower, quieter, more reflective. I replayed everything from that first gentle touch to the final glance before we let ourselves dissolve into each other. Every moment had been chosen. No one pushed, no one used, and I didn't feel like a victim, but still. I couldn't deny that something felt off, not in what we did, but in the emotion. I found myself quietly tucking way inside. It wasn't loud. It didn't accuse, but it was there, like a small hollow. In my chest, a quiet space where freedom and guilt sat side by side. I turned toward him. He was still asleep, as calm as he'd been the night before. On the nightstand was the glass of water he'd poured for me. I took a sip, then slipped out of bed, pulling his shirt over my shoulders. The feeling of fabric on my skin wasn't unpleasant, but the feeling in my chest wasn't quite as easy. I stepped out onto the balcony. San Diego was still sleepy, the city unaware of what had happened just a few hours ago. But I knew, and I found myself wondering, was a moment of passion worth the piece of peace I might have traded for it? I didn't feel regret, but I didn't feel entirely right either. And maybe that was the most honest thing I could admit. I want to share this, especially with the women who've read this. For we have the right to feel the right to choose and the right to be unsure sex intimacy. Touch, these aren't just instincts. They are a complex weaving of emotion, need, and the values we carry inside. Not every intense moment is worth. Not every desire should be fulfilled, because some things once touched, we may never return to the same way. Again, I don't feel wrong for wanting, but I know I'll have to live with this choice, whether it becomes a beautiful memory or a quiet ache that lingers. And if there's one thing I've learned from last night, it's this. We need to know our own boundaries before someone else crosses them, and more importantly, we have to be brave enough to look at the truth behind each moment of desire. And as core selves, did I choose this out of freedom? Or was I just trying to escape something? What about you? Have you ever stood at the edge of a decision that felt deeply right, but also undeniably wrong? Have you ever hesitated between feeling and consequence? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every word you leave behind. And if you want to keep exploring stories that are honest, raw, and quietly human, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you won't miss the next reflection of what it means to be seen, to choose, and to feel. I'll see you again in a different setting with a different woman, but always with the same longing to be understood, to be heard.